Nice and loud, Jessica.
Life experiences. When I turned 17, I moved out of my mother's home to live on my own. I was sucked right into the partying scene. At first, I was drinking just a few drinks every day with my friends. But it didn't take long before I went from a social drinker to a full-time alcoholic. By the time my 18th birthday rolled around, I was drinking a half gallon of vodka per day. Everybody knew no matter what day or time it was, there was always a party at my house. I was 19 when I really went down the wrong path. I was hanging out with a friend and they told me we needed to take some non-iodized salt over to someone's house. It never crossed my mind to question why. What I walked into next, I never expected. We pulled up to a white house and walked into the garage. There were 5 guys there, and as soon as I saw what was in trouble. They were cooking methamphetamine. I had no clue what to do and was so nervous, but I knew they weren't just going to let me leave after what I just witnessed. Next thing I knew, I was smoking with them. The rush and sensation that went from head to toe after the first hit had me hooked right away. I immediately felt like I never wanted to put it down. In the beginning, I would only do it for a couple days and be fine, but just like my drinking took over my life, so did the meth. It didn't take long before I was dependent on it. I was 20 when I met the love of my life, Tim. He is 5'7", blonde, sandy blonde hair, thin and blue eyes. He was my dream guy. He came over to my house with a mutual friend of ours. Within the month, we started dating. One day, the two of us were sitting at the house together, doing the only thing we truly had in common with one another, getting high. When Tim said, well, why don't we just do this ourselves? I said, do what? This, the shit we're always wasting our money on. We could do it ourselves and have way more or less than half the cost. Once we were making it on our own, we didn't need anyone else. From there, it was all profit. At least at the time, that's the way we saw it. Shortly after my 21st birthday, I found out I was pregnant. I stopped doing all drugs. I was determined to be an excellent mother, but 3 weeks after I gave birth, I was back on the downward spiral of cooking, selling, and using that. I justified what we were doing by telling myself that my son wasn't exposed to anything. Although we were cooking methamphetamine every day in our garage, the way I saw it was my son never went into the garage. The garage wasn't attached to the house, and when we came inside, we would scrub our hands, so I felt we were taking the precautions to keep him safe. When my son was 3 months old, we took him over to Tim's parents so Tim and I could go see his probation officer for his regular weekly report. After he was done seeing her and we were walking to our vehicle, the narcotics officer came up to us and said there was a detective next door that wanted to speak to the both of us. When we got in the building, Tim asked if he could use my phone to call his mom and tell her we were going to be a little longer than expected. As soon as I handed him the phone, the detective yanked it from him, slammed it on the table, and said there will be plenty of time for you guys to make phone calls later. That's when I knew we were in trouble. The detective took me into an empty room and explained that they had heard we were cooking meth at our house and asked if I would mind if they went and searched the home. I said no, why would I care? We aren't doing anything. I signed a consent form allowing the search. The officer asked if he could follow me out to my house because he wanted to keep this quiet until further notice. I agreed to let him. When I came around the curve before my house, there were police vehicles everywhere. Clearly, this wasn't something I was going to be kept quiet. When I went to unlock the back door, the detective and 6 other state police officers seemed to be breathing down my neck. The detective grabbed my hand and explained that if I was lying to them and they walked in and found anything at all, that Tim and I both would be arrested immediately. I unlocked the door and let them all go in while I sat at the kitchen table. I watched them search through all our personal belongings. Next thing I knew, the detective and Tim's probation officer were standing in front of me, and I heard him quietly say something to her, and her response back was, I can hold him for violation of probation until further notice. I knew right then they must have found something. My heart felt like it was going to beat right out of my chest. The next few seconds were the longest seconds of my life. The detective turned towards me and cold as ice stated, Tim is going away for a really long time. In a daze, I replied, what? What do you mean? We found a 1-pot meth lab in your garage. It seemed like time stood completely still. I didn't know what to say, think, or even do. I started bawling my eyes out. The detective told me to grab what I needed for the night and said that I should find somewhere else to go for the time being. I grabbed what I could of my sons, got in my car, and quickly pulled out of there and picked my son up from Tim's parents' house and went straight to my mother's. The next day, my mom and I went and took a drug test at Escoda County DHS. The following day, the head CPS worker showed up at my mother's house asking my side of things. I was completely honest with him. He told me he had no choice but to file a petition with the courts requesting that his son be removed from my care and placed into foster care. The prosecutor agreed to allow my son to stay with my mother until my first court hearing on one condition. That condition was that I wasn't allowed to be around my boy. I agreed, gathered my belongings, and left. Once I was back at my house, reality started to sink in. What had we done? What were we even thinking? We had not once thought about
That's going to go for a while.
once thought about our son, but only of ourselves. I was determined I was going to make this right. The next day, I started making calls. I was on the phone with several rehabs. I explained my situation and told them I needed help. It was established I was going to treatment as soon as my first court hearing was over. I admitted myself into a 2-week rehab at Munson Medical in Traverse City. While there, I set up an appointment with Catholic Human Services for counseling when I went home. At that point, I believed the safest place my son was to be in foster care, and the best place for me would be with my mother. That was one of the hardest decisions of my life. Once I returned home, I was attending 4 support group meetings a week. I was also getting counseling at Catholic Human Services, parenting classes, and had started meeting with a recovery coach to help me stay on the right path. It has now been a little over 8 months since all that happened. I have my son back for good. I completed my counseling at Catholic Human Services. I still attend support groups twice a week, and I'm a full-time student at ACC. Escota County DHS workers told me that I'm the first person they have ever seen come into their office who has put themselves into a treatment center without being told to. The first to basically complete my service plan before even getting one. The first in history to have their child back for good in less than 6 months, and the only case to be closed within 9 months. No matter what wrong turns you take on your journey through life, you can overcome any obstacles and achieve your highest goals. A year ago, I would have never expected to be happy being sober, let alone attending college to become a social worker. All through this, I've never cursed the system, the police, or even DHS. In all honesty, I'm thankful every day. If it wasn't for all this happening, I would not be here today doing the things I'm doing or working towards helping people in similar situations.
Thank you.